I'm gonna give it just a moment because it was working and then I interrupted it and now I'm reconnecting it. So I'm sorry about that.
Well,
Um, I've done this with my presentations before, but not with a guest. Okay. All right. So we are back. Thank you for your patience, Karen, and for our viewers. Um, okay, so we've got the things that you don't ever want to do. Would you recap them one more time, just the quick
yep.
admonish?
The three A's. So just keep in mind three A's. You don't want to advise, you don't want to admonish, and you don't want to apologize. And the apologize kind of came with a question mark for me too. Like, why not? Isn't that a kind thing to do? And if your soon-to-be ex weaponizes anything and everything they can, then know that you're sorry, know that you'll do better next time. Don't necessarily share it because you're just handing them a weapon and you don't need another weapon used against you,
They
especially
hung
when
up.
you're being like thoughtful and kind and saying, oh, my bad, I do that thing. I shouldn't do it. I won't do it again. Well, um, just don't do it again.
Just don't do it again, but don't apologize for it.
And that's from Bill Eddy. Bill Eddy is, I would say like the king of high conflict. He is both an attorney and a therapist. He started the High Conflict Institute. He has trained, I'm sure, thousands of people, mediators and other individuals. And there's just also great resources at the High Conflict Institute. And he also, I had said this before, so I'll just say it again. He wrote Splitting, which is protecting yourself while divorcing someone with borderline or narcissistic personality disorder. And this book is an encyclopedia. It literally has anything that you would want to know. So it's well worth investing in.
So, Karen, how about the things that we should be doing? And maybe before I even ask that question, what is the goal when somebody is talking to, communicating with a spouse, and it is high conflict, and we're going through mediation or the divorce process? Like, what is the goal of those like why are we communicating in the first place?
I think that I'd like to take a step back from that question
Yeah.
because, like, when I think about, what is the number one obstacle that everybody I've spoken to, and myself included, going into a high conflict divorce situation, like, where do we all trip up? And and so it really comes down to not being honest with ourselves, and a snarky way of saying it is like our own delusion. And
Okay.
so I want to talk about for a moment, if I could,
Please.
acceptance and resistance. And so let's say you and I have this relationship, and you show up and you're you're critical of me, you're short, you don't stand by your promises or your commitments. You always have a different perspective of what happened yesterday than I do. Like, you're difficult. And when I go to talk to you, it's like, oh, really, Karen, you have a problem? Let me tell you about the problem I have with you. It's you deflect, you project. So the people who are married to these individuals, we live in resistance. And this is what resistance sounds like. I can't believe she criticized me. Has she ever criticized you before? She criticizes me 8 days a week. Help me to understand why you can't believe she criticized you.
Mm.
And we all do it. I can't believe I can't believe she. And I am not just unbelieving about it, I am triggered by it, I am surprised by it, I am reactive around it
Mm.
every bloody time it happens. And I've been married doing this same dance for what, 7, 17, 37 years. They all come with the exact same thing. I can't believe. And so I think that I recently did a reel on the difference between accepting and acceptable. The behavior is not acceptable.
Okay.
But if we don't accept that it's their behavior, and I'll use myself as an example, my ex-husband, I'm certain, has some kind of bipolar. He's swung a lot. So he wasn't always mean and nasty. Sometimes he was just super lovely. You just never knew who you were going to get. So we had Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the house. Um, but when I I would not be accepting of the fact that this is a man who has called me the C word, who has called me the B word, who has belittled and berated me over and over again. And instead of being like, my husband is verbally and emotionally abusive, I would be like, oh, that's just him. You know, he's got a short fuse. He has a bad temper. He has a potty mouth. Well, I can't address my problem, which is I have an abusive spouse, until I acknowledge that it's abusive, right? I accept that I am married to somebody who is verbally and physically abusive. I'm not saying the abuse is acceptable, but I'm saying I accept it, which means the next time I walk in the door, I don't have to be surprised that I get hit with A, B, or C because I know this. I am, and here it is, write it down, expecting and accepting of
Yeah.
who this human being is. And this may be your mother, your father, your sister, you know, your boss, your teenage kid temporarily. When we're accepting of how someone shows up, not judging them, discerning, not judgment, we could talk about that too. When I'm accepting that, I know that this is a behavior that has been happening over and over again. And so when I mention whatever, I want to go away for the weekend with my girlfriends, and I get ripped to shreds because I'm a bad parent, and how dare I, and how, instead of being like, oh my God, I'm so surprised, I'm so angry, I could be like, I want to go away for the weekend with my sisters and my girlfriend, and he is going to have this reaction. How do I strategically know that? And either how I present it, when I present it, maybe I don't present it and I just get a babysitter for the weekend and I just make my plans. Like all of a sudden, I have choice
Mm,
because I am accepting of how that person shows up. And so, to your initial question, one of the things people across the board do is we're not accepting of what is. And part of it is it's been normalized.
yes.
He's just got a bad temper. And my family was like, Karen, we're worried for your safety. Oh, geez, he just has a bad temper. So I would encourage anyone listening to even talk to a friend, a sibling, somebody who's healthy, and don't defend your partner, spouse, soon to be ex. Listen and be curious.
Mm,
Why do you see it that way? What is it you're seeing that I'm not seeing? Because when you can kind of stand in what's real and true, you're on the right path. When you're delusional or you're um, surprised and angry and disappointed, you're dysregulated and you're not able to be a strong stand for yourself or your children.
mm. Wow, Karen, that's really powerful. I just like today had a conversation with a client who's going through this with his soon-to-be ex-wife. And he just made that shift that you're talking about. And he's like, for so many years, I lived with this person and I just is normal. He's like, now I'm really seeing how, like, I'm seeing this behavior. And he's like, wow. And the shift from feeling victimized to feeling empowered was just so clear in his body language. Because, like you said, now, like, yeah, it sucks. I wish they weren't abusive,
Right.
but they are. So now that I've accepted that, I can decide, well, now what am I going to do? Right? How am I going to handle it? How am I going to move forward through this process instead of getting in that helpless place of it shouldn't be like this, but it is.
Exactly. And that's the resistance. He shouldn't, she shouldn't. So I'm in resistance. So I have no choice. I can't make decisions. I can't be strategic because I'm stuck in just change. You shouldn't be this
It
way.
shouldn't be this way. Yeah,
Well,
reality needs to be different.
and I always say, like, that ship has sailed. If you could have helped them change, if they were interested in changing, if changing was possible, you probably would not be on this live right now listening to us.
Right. Right. You wouldn't be in this high conflict divorce if you had the power to change this person.
A
And
hundred.
Karen, do you have any insights into like what it is that keeps us like wanting so badly for it to be different, like, or keeps us holding on when all the evidence, because it's like I see this with a lot of my clients too, like you said, well, has he criticized you before? Like my clients are like, I can't believe, that she could do this. Well, has she done it before? Oh yeah, she does it all the time. She calls me names all the time. She's accused me of being narcissistic and controlling for years. Right? But I can't believe she would do that. And it's almost like they have this fantasy image of who she is or what the marriage is, and they're so attached. Like it almost seems like they don't want to grieve that the loss of what they wanted it to be to face what it was. Like, what's your experience with like, why do we cling to it when the evidence is so overwhelming that that's just not
Yeah,
true?
I think I would say there's probably three different levels. On one level, I think a lot of us are unconscious going
Okay.
through life. I mean, I got married a little bit later and I was totally unconscious. I didn't realize it. But so you're going through life and if you're going through life unconscious, you're typically in that victim seat. So things happen to you. Why does everything keep happening to me? As if you don't have agency in all of it. But when you're unconscious, you don't even realize that you don't have agency. And if you had agency, if you became more conscious, that
Uh,
everything would be different. And so, you get married, you start having a family. Of course, none of us want that family to be broken up. And then a level of consciousness is starting to look in the mirror. What
mm,
what what attracted me to this person? What's the baggage I brought to the table? We usually know by that point what the baggage is that they brought to the table. We're pretty sharp and articulate on that one. But the consciousness is really low, right? We're kind of, dare I say, sleepwalking through life. I've got my two kids. I get up, I go to work, I come home, we have dinner, we have the same fight over and over again. We lift up the carpet, we sweep some of the problems underneath it, we start climbing over the mountain in the middle of the living room, we get up, we go to work, and we kind of get into this thing. So one of the super valuable silver linings of divorce in general, and certainly high conflict divorce, is our feet are to the fire. We have to wake up. And there are people who don't, and they will go through the divorce. And the high conflict people typically don't wake up. They go through the divorce, they blame and shame, and then they rinse and repeat. And I'll just say this because I can't help myself. First marriages have a 50% divorce rate, give or take. Second marriage is at 67. Third marriage is 73. We I've actually had clients who came to me on their fourth divorce. And it's
mm,
like, are you willing to own your part yet? Or do you need to get divorced two or three more times? If this is your first divorce, let's make sure it's your last, which means waking up, looking at what you brought to the table. And I want to talk about this because for those of us who have been victims of a high conflict person, it's like, what did I bring to the table? They're
I
the
was,
bad ones. I'm the good one.
yeah.
Totally. So
Yeah.
so so when we know what we've brought to the table and we use the pain of every argument, every negotiation, every discomfort to heal and refine ourselves, then we emerge a completely different version of ourselves. Now you're not going to attract Mary Jane that you were married to. You're going to attract somebody who's conscious, who operates at a higher emotional level because you've up leveled yourself. And now you have the possibility, still with some of the same baggage, but to come together and to love and support each other to heal and refine and up level together. And that's really, I mean, that's my desire, is to just bring down the second and third marriage divorce
Divorce
levels
rate.
and help people go out and find, if you want, find real healthy love.
Mm. So, Karen, that's so powerful, and I want to ask you a question about this. But for those of you who are with us live, I want to encourage you, join me in the chat. If you have any questions for Karen, drop them in the chat and we'll talk about them. I'll make sure she gets them. But I would also love to hear what made you join this call with us today. So drop it in the chat. Let us know what you're going through, what you're experiencing, and we can speak to some of that as well. Um, so Karen, I talk to a lot of men who see those very same divorce statistics and they're like, why the heck would I ever get married again? Because it feels to them like it's inevitable. Like it's like flipping a coin, right? Like it's a one and one chance
Yeah.
in my first marriage that it's going to end in divorce,
Yeah.
or because they've been the victim of that high conflict person, that high conflict woman, they're like, well, women are the reason, right? Look
Yes.
what my wife did to me. And she caused this divorce, and she's being horrible during it, and she's putting her kids through this, and she's accusing me of all these things. So they look at those rates and they're like, I don't want to do this again. And it's even more likely next time. But what you're saying is the opposite. You're saying they can control whether or not the second marriage ends in divorce or not. So would you tell me more about how do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, 100%, 100%. So the way we do that is we clean out our luggage a little bit. We do that personal work because when I heal my childhood wounds, when I notice my shortcomings and I work on them, and I've got a list of what the typical spouse of a high conflict partner is coming to the table with. When
Okay.
we do that, in your group, we talked about emotional energy, right? So we're all balls of energy. And when we're a victim, we're kind of down in the dungeon. And when we're in conflict, we're kind of in the basement. And then we emerge at the first floor when we start taking some responsibility for our part. So the first thing I'll say is we're all grown ass men and women. We made this decision as adults. Most people, very few people that I've ever engaged with got married like before 16, 17, 18 years old, right? So we were adults, but we didn't know what we didn't know. And so now when you say, okay, I want to work on my part in this. Yes, I want to be the best parent I can. Yes, I want to make sure my kids are okay. That's all fine and good, but what about you? Why did you end up in this situation? And at first, my clients will say, because of her, because of him. No, no, you ended up in the situation because of you. Well, what does that look like? I'm so kind. I'm so caring. I gave 250%, Karen. I did everything. Okay, well, that would be the first problem.
Yeah.
Why in the world would you give 250% while you're getting 10% back?
Hmm.
Well, because I thought if I loved a little bit more and I did a little bit more. Okay. And how many years were you married for? 25. And you did that for 25 years. At what point did you not realize that me giving more and more and more and more is not the solution? Because what am I doing? When I give to you, Rachel, as my high conflict spouse, I'm taking away from me.
Hmm.
And so it's like, I know you're not giving me anything, but you know what? I'll take care of the kids too. And I'll bring home the bacon and I'll cook the bacon. I'll do the yard work. I'll do the laundry. I'll do this. You go to, what else can I do? Now, two things are going to happen. I'm going to be a martyr because I'm going to be really ticked off that I'm doing everything, but I've offered to do everything. And then I'll even find more to do in the hopes that you might love me a little bit more.
Hmm.
And at the root of that is absolutely codependence. There have been so few people who aren't somewhere, like everything, this is a spectrum, um, somewhere on the codependent spectrum. So at the worst, and I have an assessment I'd be happy to share with you, 25 questions.
Yeah.
And I think I answered like 24. Yes. Hell
Wow.
yes.
Okay.
And now maybe I have like one or two where I'm like, yeah, sometimes maybe. Look at that. And so we heal ourselves. And so someone who's codependent is going to smile when they're not happy. They're going to say yes when they want to say no. They're going to, and this may not be for your guys, but for the women, they'll absolutely have sex when they don't want to have sex, just to like shut them up and get it over with. And so in your case, there may be something else that the men do. And so what we do is we abandon ourselves. So the root of codependence could come from so many different things. My dad was an alcoholic. My mom was a rageaholic. I have clients who had a parent with a personality disorder. I had a client whose dad, um, I had a client, a male client, whose father died when he was 8 years old, and he was given the role of the man of the house. What we do in codependence is as children, we give away our innocence, or it's taken away from us because all of a sudden we have to be the grown up in the room. I had my 14-year-old say, why is it every time I fight with daddy, I feel like I'm the grown up? And I was like, well, for good reason. You kind of are at this point. And he's my codependent that we've been working on now. He's 28, so it's 14 years later. He's doing much better. We we intuitively as children know how to create coping mechanisms. And for those of you listening in, which one of you knew, let me get quiet, let me fly under the radar, let me not ask for very much, let me not make a fuss so that nobody gets angry or blows up, or so that mommy doesn't get in trouble or daddy does, whatever. um, so one thing is to get really quiet. For a lot of us, I was just having this conversation with my group of women. Oh, I want to be seen in this crazy household. And so I'm going to be a straight A student. I'm going to be an all-star softball player. And then I'm going to go out in the world and I'm going to be a phenomenal professional. But don't go looking behind the front door of my house, because I'm a codependent and it's a, pardon my French, shit show back there. And so this is what we do. So for those of you who think, well, I know what's wrong with her, what did I bring to the table? People pleasing, codependence, fear of conflict. And don't beat yourself up. And you beat yourself up. You might be a perfectionist or be super, super critical of yourself. And when you're critical of yourself, you're not critical of your adult self, because your adult self's not the one who's scared. It's the little boy. You're being so critical of this little boy who's told, don't cry, only sissies cry, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and all this other BS. Or I'm going to beat you if you don't know, whatever your situation was. And so it's the dysfunction that we grow up in. And I want you to hear this. It's the only way I know intimate love is based on what happened in my family of origin. My mom and dad, what a terrible example of intimate love that was. They fought all the time. Dad was passive aggressive. Mom was just angry and aggressive and overwhelmed with three young kids. And so the three of us grew up, and that was intimate love. And I have an older and a younger sister, and we could trace our own broken relationships based on our only experience of intimate love, which was broken.
Oh, wow. Karen, you bring so much compassion to it, right? Because when you say, well, own your part, and what is your part? And you've just been through the ringer, right? Like that hurts a little bit. It's like, oh, well, now there's shame. And that's, the pattern I see with a lot of the men I work with is they sacrifice so much. And they work harder and they make more money and they don't have time for their hobbies and they let go of their friends, and it's that happy wife, happy life, and they will do anything. And I've had, some men in the community recently saying, look, like I knew when I got married that I was in it no matter what forever. And regardless of what she's doing or not doing or giving or not doing, and the amount of sacrifice of self
Yeah.
in a relationship, especially with somebody who's just taking and giving nothing back, is so, it's such a big piece to overcome. But you just brought so much compassion to it by
And I think,
saying like there's a reason you are that way.
and it's so important, for each and every one of you, take that bat that you've been beating yourself up with, put it way back in the furthest corner of the deepest closet you have, and stop beating yourself up.
Mm.
Everyone who ends up in these relationships was almost predestined. It's like we didn't know what we didn't know. And so, this I learned in 12-step programs, the very coping mechanisms that children intuitively know, because we're just walking intuitive balls of energy, right? So, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old is going to know, let me go in the closet, let me get quiet, let me not ask for dinner, whatever it is, let me stay safe. We bring those coping mechanisms into our adult relationships, not consciously, unconsciously. Now it's just how we are. It's
Right.
like, oh, I could read a room. I'm really proud of being able to read a room. You're a blazing codependent. That's why you're able to read it, so that you can decide, who am I going to be for Rachel, and who am I going to be for Karen, and who am I going to be for Bill? Because I've been taught to be safe by reading the room and adjusting. And so I'm a chameleon. I don't even know who I am. Whatever your variation of this is, you bring you into an intimate relationship. But the coping mechanisms that kept us safe are the ones we really need to shed, like a snake skin, in order to find healthy love, and be healthy love. And my experience has been, I have some friends in super healthy marriages where they work all of that out, and it's just beautiful. It's like, I see your inner child. I see your inner child. I accept your wounds, and I'm going to just stand. I'm going to hold space. I'm going to love on you. I'll be kind. I'll be honest as you heal and I heal, and we just become the best version of ourselves. That is what marriage is supposed to be. But when you have one high conflict person, you also have a wounded person. And so rather than beat yourself up, you can go back to the beginning. I'm going to accept that she has those tendencies and that I brought my coping mechanisms, and now I'm going to start shedding them. I'm going to look at my codependence. I'm going to look at my people pleasing. Why is it so scary for me to set a boundary? Why is it so hard for me to stand my ground and say something that's true, even if I know that they're going to feel hurt by the truth? I'm not being hurtful. I'm not being nasty, but I'm speaking my truth. Why would I choose not to speak my truth? Because I'm abandoning myself, because my whole life I was trained to stay safe, abandon yourself. Well, once you start committing to yourself, the world will commit to you. Beautiful, healthy people will commit to you. That's where the gift is. That is absolutely the silver lining in this very difficult journey that we're all on.
Karen, there's a good question from Jerome who's watching with us. Um, he says, "Hi, my ex-wife was actually receiving counseling for her codependence, but it really felt as though it was the other way around. I'm confused what it really means. I thought I did almost everything." And then he follows up with, "Or my question is, are these categories sometimes a little dangerous in the hands of the disordered, codependency and boundary setting?" Um,
You will certainly find people, and I'm just going to not diagnose, so difficult, high conflict people will say you break boundaries, will say you're the narcissist, will say you're alienating the children. So these are all, everything's a weapon in the hands or the mouth or the mind of a high conflict person. Everything's a weapon. And, one of the things they say in 12-step programs are, the more intelligent you are, the more the disease can screw you up. And I have found the same thing with disordered people. The more intelligent somebody with a disorder or with a high conflict personality is, the more they can take all of these pieces and use them as grenades to fling back. There is something, and Jerome, you may want to Google. I can't think of a resource off the top of my head, but I was just talking to a client because she found a new man and they're both codependent. And so it's an interesting thing when two codependents come together, and there's different kinds of problems. I have a sense that those are not the problems you and your ex-wife faced. And so it might be helpful to listen to or read the description of codependence, because it's really um, abandoning ourselves to do what we believe another person wants us to do for them to feel safe or for them to get what they want. And we do it because we're controlling, which most codependents are like, I'm controlling. They're the ones who are controlling. But if you think about it, Jerome, everything you do under codependence is to control, or was to control, your then wife, right? And so if it's, I'm not going to go out with the guys, or I'm going to go out and I'm going to do the whole yard, and I'm even going to do the yard and then clean up the playroom, and I'm going to do everything because I want her to be calm and I want her to be the happy wife. And so if I tie myself into enough of a pretzel, maybe I can control the other human being. And we talked about this in your program the other night. That's such a foundational part of a codependent, is we're very controlling. And we never, it's such a surprise to all of us, but we're trying to control It's like being in a sailboat and grabbing for the wind instead of the sail. I'm the sail. If I want to get from point A to one point B, I can work on myself and get there. But if I'm trying to control my spouse, I'm grabbing at the wind. There's nothing there, but I'll do everything to try to make that work. And that's what makes it controlling.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Karen. I'm going to drop one resource in the chat for them. Do you know Codependence No More by Melody Beattie?
Oh, I have it on my bookshelf.
Yes, that's a
Chapter 4, I believe it is particularly good. It's just huge lists of do you, do you, do you, do you. It's brilliant. And you can just check off what you are. And then when you get better at it, you can cross it off. And it's a great book.
Uh, There's another question. This is from, I believe, a woman who's watching. She says, my husband has abandoned me and will not talk to me. How to heal after abandonment?
Mm. I'm so sorry. Being in a situation where you're iced out, and that was not my personal experience, but I've had so many clients, it's equally as painful as the person who's belittling and berating, right? It's such an isolating feeling. And so, do you have her name? First name?
I know her handle here is Shell, Shell, Shell.
Okay, Shell.
So we'll call
So,
her Shell.
so Shell, I would say to you, Um, what I just said a minute ago was absolutely mind blowing to me way back when I was doing my work, which is if I abandon myself, I will attract other people who abandon me. And that was my life until post divorce, until my mid 40s. And so if your spouse is abandoning you, I would say uh, read the Hearts book, get in touch with your inner child and start loving on yourself because the best way that you can heal, and I know you probably feel like you need something from him to heal. And there's a lot of ways of journaling and writing him a letter and that kind of a thing. But at the end of the day, if he's abandoning you, he's probably been abandoning you in other ways. And so take a look at how have you abandoned yourself and what would it look like for you to be have a love affair with yourself. What would change if you focused on your needs, your wants, your comfort? A lot of us who are codependent immediately feel like I can't do that, that's really selfish, right? Like that's the bad thing. Like the bad thing is if anyone calls me selfish, I'm mortified because I'm such a codependent. I'm a service-oriented person. I like giving, which is all very true. But there's a tipping point where it's not healthy. And so for you, if that fear of selfishness comes up, if you have a therapist, if you have a girlfriend, if you have a coach, I would work through that because your healing is going to be in honoring the pain you've gone through and in pouring into yourself and loving on yourself and any healthy people. It's an interesting thing if you have healthy girlfriends, siblings, what have you. How comfortable are you asking them to support you? That's a great thing to do too, because now you're inviting in something that's different and it feels uncomfortable for those of us who are givers, givers, givers. It's like you might be like, no, 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 I don't need your help. Don't do that. Yes, thank you so much. I so appreciate it. And so that's my suggestion.
Oh, that's beautiful. Karen, you said a lot in a very succinct package there. Jerome says he really loved the metaphor with the sailboat. So thank you for sharing that one.
Excellent.
Um, there's a couple of guys in our chat here, Jan and Matt, who are sharing some thoughts that I hear so often, especially here on YouTube. And I would love, you're in a unique, well, I don't know if unique compared to me, I guess. I work only with men and I see that side of it. You work with men and women. So this is I think self-protective response that I hear from a lot of men is that, well, women just don't don't love the same way that men do. Right. And so what Jan said is there's no happy women unless you have a big size wallet. Or Matt says men are in love, women are in business. And Matt, I love that you said that because that's the exact sentence that I see a lot in these YouTube videos. So Karen, from your experience, I would love for you to just speak to that? And what can you offer to guys who are feeling that way?
Well, just to add a little levity, I can't tell you how often my clients have asked me, can't you introduce us to each other? Because because you guys are married not to women like the women in my group. The women in my group are would resonate with you completely. And so if you're married to somebody who, and I've had so many male clients, and it's like, there's not enough time in the day for me to get yet another job so that she can spend more money. And you have a broken picker. It's who you picked, and you picked who you picked because of your experience of intimate love.
Mm.
There are oodles of high conflict men out there who are displeasing, and there are oodles of high conflict women out there who are displeasing. And maybe they're not high conflict, maybe they're just self-serving, or they're or they have other tendencies that don't fall into generous, kind, loving, dedicated, committed. And so one of the things I love doing is having co-ed groups, and let me tell you, I've had a really hard time putting them together.
Gotcha.
I think so. And the reason when I've done them, when I did them in person years ago, then I would get a room filled with men and women, and it was the most healing thing for everybody because they were listening to the guy who didn't sound like their husband. They sounded like them. And the men were listening to the women, and it didn't sound like their inconsiderate or selfish or whatever wife. It sounded like them. And so human beings come in all shapes and sizes. And I would so strongly encourage you that it's as bad as like grabbing a culture or skin color and saying all such and such people are. It's just it doesn't work that way. But when you heal, and even if you're not interested in dating, when you heal and you go back out into the world, even your female colleagues, everything will be different because you're showing up differently. And you will, we're balls of energy. And so you'll magnetically attract. If you're down here in the dungeon, you're attracting crappy energy. If you're up here on the penthouse, you're attracting gorgeous energy. The more you do to heal and refine yourself, no matter what you want to attract, it will be a healthier version. As you get healthier, it's almost like you're on two different floors. You're not even going to meet those crappy people anymore because you're up here.
You know, Karen, I love that you shared that because it's one of the things that I see a lot with the clients that I work with in Better Beyond Divorce is they do all this work to figure out like what are my patterns? What did I learn about intimate love? Why do I choose the partners I choose? And then when they do go out and start dating, what they tend to notice and is that they're the people they have that initial attraction to, that initial spark, are the wrong people. Like
Yes.
because that's so conditioned in me from, and so it feels like all women are this, but it's just the only women I've ever even paid any attention to are like this because that's my programming. And one of the exercises that I've done that has had the best results is I always encourage my clients to, whether it's dating or friendship, to talk to people and especially to women that they normally wouldn't.
100%.
And it's amazing. It makes it so much easier to find that human connection and realize that like not everyone is the same. But it feels that way if you're still living in in your same pattern, right? If you haven't looked at your part, and then you are kind of doomed to relive it because all the women in your life will be that kind of
And
woman.
and I'll actually just to put a bow on that, I love that. If you're out socializing or dating and something feels really comfortable, you're in the wrong neighborhood. Wrong neighborhood.
That's so good.
The more uncomfortable, the more unfamiliar, the more uncomfortable. You want to be in an unfamiliar neighborhood. I spent my whole life, every guy I ever dated was like, we were like explosions from the beginning. And what was behind that was all of the chaos. I grew up in chaos. I was attracted to chaos. And then, of course, the chaos goes from this frenetic supposed love or limerence to something that we've all experienced, right? Which is displeasing chaos. And so as you go back out into the world, be uncomfortable, go for the unfamiliar, and you will be heading in the right direction.
Oh, that's such a good compass to follow. It takes a lot of courage, though,
Yeah.
because it does feel unfamiliar, uncomfortable. I have seen a lot of men make incredible new connections and relationships from it, though, which has been very cool.
And I think with dating, and I'm back out dating too, so this is like something that I'm personally doing myself as well, is um if they're interesting enough for a second conversation, the sparks are irrelevant. It's like just go out on 2 or 3 dates. And because especially if you're coming from that chaotic, frenetic energy, you could see women as boring.
Mm.
If there's enough interest, like I think the rule is three, commit to 3 dates. Unless it's horrible and there's nothing to talk about. But if you have conversation, but you're like, 3 dates, because what you do is you break through something both for yourself and maybe in interpersonal relations with that person. But yeah, it's like we're actually I was on Match and there was a fella and I knew within 2 seconds I was like, oh, he is so big and so flashy. And so I was like, swipe left. You're high conflict in the making. So pay attention to that.
Yeah, we have to rewire our own patterns, right? Because it's
100%.
so familiar, it'll subconsciously pull us in if we're not awake to what that is. And if we haven't taken the time to figure out what it is that got me into this relationship, made me choose this partner in the first place.
And I think to your point, like the interesting thing about consciousness is as you're going through your divorce, you're going to be like, oh, I'm learning a lot about myself. Oh, look at this. My consciousness is going up. And then you're all of a sudden dating again and we slip. So it's not a linear forward. And so we're going to slip a little bit. And so it's so important to keep your radar up and to keep looking at yourself and saying, was that too comfortable? Am I slipping? Because nobody else is going to do it but you. And so you slip a little bit, but then you'll go a little higher, and then you'll slip a little bit, but then you'll go a little bit higher. And so it's a great journey to be on.
Well, Karen Shell says, thank you so much for speaking about the self-love piece for her. Um, we have just a couple minutes left before we've got to sign off. And I'd love to just circle around. We started with this topic of communicating with a high conflict spouse. And then I love where we went into codependency and agency and choice. Um, Karen, is there anything that we haven't said that you want to make sure folks who are on this call hear about how to communicate with that high conflict person?
I think that for all of the skills that I teach, what's so much more important is what's going on under the water, right? It's you can tell someone how you should talk, what you should and shouldn't say, but what tethers us down is our insecurities, our self-doubt, all of the things that our fear of judgment, our fear of being selfish, whatever that is. And so I would say um, when you learn how to emotionally regulate and check in with yourself. And so a pause is a great thing. If you're not sure, be conscious. I need a minute. I'm going to take a walk around the block. I'm going to go into the bathroom. Like whatever situation you're in, the more familiar you can be with what are those things for me? What are my what's my tender underbelly? And how is that impacting? And so let's say your spouse says something to you and you might hear, like, we have a filter in our ears, we have a lens on our eyes. We never hear what they're saying. We
Mm.
hear our interpretation of what they're saying. We see our interpretation of what they're doing. And so your lens is the thing that's all smudged with like little kid fingerprints, and it's our fears and it's our insecurities and it's all of that. And so the more we know ourselves, that under the cover part, the more we can regulate, slow down any interaction, feel comfortable setting a boundary, stepping away, allowing for a pause.
Mhm.
It's probably the thing I say the most in both my podcast interviews and with my clients is let's slow that down. I swear to God, I probably say those words more than anything else because it's what we need to do. And so, whatever you're facing and whatever is most difficult for you, get crystal clear on these are the things that are most difficult for me that my wife says, my ex-wife does, whatever that is. How do I handle it? What's my interpretation? What part of my interpretation is actually my wound and not her? And what part of it is her that maybe I'm not accepting, that I want to stop resisting and start accepting so that I can come up with creative choices? And so it all comes down to us again.
Yes.
What needs to be healed, what needs to be refined. When we spend our life healing and refining, and can't help but end on this, we break generational chains. We
Mm.
teach our children to not be codependent and to not be demanding. We take what we've learned, we pour it into the little human beings we've brought into this world, and we begin the process of breaking a generational chain that might go back so many generations. I know in my household it has, and in so many, whether it's alcohol or personality disorders or verbal and emotional and physical abuse or what have you. Work on healing and refining, and you have found the treasure chest of life.
Mm. Oh, Karen, I can't think of a better place to end. How can people get in touch with you? Anybody who's watching this and is like, wow, Karen, you blew my mind. I want to work with you. How can you help me more? I will share links to your website and everything in the video description as soon as the live is over. But what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much. I've told you how much I love doing this and I love what you do. And so I so appreciate the opportunity to come and chat. And we have a YouTube page too. So I'm Journey Beyond Divorce, the podcast, the website, the YouTube page. The social media. So you can go to Journey Beyond Divorce. We do have a free coaching call for anyone who's considering enrolling and investing with us. And that would be rapidreliefcall.com. And you could just book a call. You'll get either me or one of my coaches, depending on when you do it. And we will spend some time and support you powerfully.
Amazing. Well, Karen, thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you, and I always learn so much. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank
And
you.
thank you to all of our live viewers as well, and for your great questions. I really appreciate you guys showing up and being